say the lack of response from parents who are living with their anxious children and are still not compelled to, do something. It doesn't even have to be big, but do something to start short-circuiting that. Like, how anxious do kids need to be? And if we don't take a moment to step back and say, how am I contributing to this anxiety, then are we being remiss as parents? I feel like we are. And I do think that, as we know with this podcast, it's all about alchemising education. That is part of that education, because I think we're students of life.
Yes.
Folks, to another episode of Faark the Shoulds, little sister, Alchemising Education. Today we are talking all about our addiction to the extraordinary and how that relates to our kids. And of course, I am joined by one of my favourite people in the entire universe, beautiful, curious Quinn. Hello.
Oh, hello. Thank you once again. Always a delight to be here.
And you are bringing the goods, Quinny, on this subject matter. I think because your experience with the extraordinary in your family and that drive for the extraordinary has been so strong and so felt. Before I get too far ahead, I am Jodi from QuantiMama.
And I'm curious, Quinn.
You are just so curious. So curious. She's got all the questions, peeps.
Yep.
So what does it actually mean? What are we talking about today? We're talking about the addiction of being extraordinary. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, well, I just feel like in today's society we have this great need to prove ourselves, to reach a level of success that we feel others will look at us and go, wow, isn't she extraordinary? Or isn't he extraordinary? And I just feel like it keeps us trapped, and I think it keeps us in a state of always wanting more, needing more, seeking more, striving for more, and never being satisfied with what we've got.
Well, it fits into a lack state, doesn't it?
Totally.
Because you're looking, and I understand people think you need that drive to achieve, but I also think in the quantum field where we are co-creators, say, if you want to subscribe to that thought, that belief system, that if we are co-creating, then in fact the juice comes out of us in the nicest way possible. It sounds very dirty for the start of a podcast, but there we are. But the juice will flow when we're in alignment with whatever we're meant to be doing. The stuff just flows out, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really
But for
does.
some reason, we've got this rite of passage with kids where we say you've got to work, you've got to, commit, you've got to put the hours in, you've got to do the toil, and it's all that sort of arduous pushing upstream thing. It's not flow.
And it's not necessarily connection with their soul either.
Correct.
It's done based on external markers,
Yes.
and rather than just what lights them up.
Yes, that's right. Which is how we find, I know that sport's been a big feature in your family, but this love of the game, which can be, I'm not necessarily within your family, but within the field that you guys have operated in.
Yes.
You've probably seen a lot of kids who have done a lot of training and been very good at their position, but ultimately have fallen out of love of what they're doing.
Absolutely, with big dreams, because again, we have these screens and these social media platforms and these people who are put on pedestals as being amazing human beings who have achieved, things that we celebrate.
Yeah.
And that's just one part of them. And often a lot of those people, when it comes to the end of their journey in that area,
Yes.
you hear many, many, many stories of where they're lost.
Yes.
And they don't know who they are without that. And the pressure to keep going and to be a certain person.
Yes.
They just don't know who they really are.
Yes.
And that's the stuff that I think with young people we just need to be really aware of. What is it that's driving them? I mean, I know you know, in my family, you know, there was one who just wanted to strive to be an Olympian and represent Australia, you know, in the green and gold, and now is talking about wanting to live happily on a piece of land, you know, growing their own vegetables and just living the quiet life. And I look at that, and it was really interesting because when that was spoken, that dream was mentioned, because we see it in the media all the time. And I remember thinking, do I support this or do I downplay it, or do I keep it grounded, or what do I do in this moment? And it was a really hard thing to know what to do, like as a parent, again, you know, do I support or do I just, anyway, you know, the dreams change, and that's totally okay, but it makes it very tricky for people to know how far to push, what to do, how far to support. And there's a lot of kids out there who are living sometimes their parents' dream.
Well, these conversations we're having are really about the fact that we observe in our society and in our community a lot of unhappy kids.
Totally.
Like just a lot of I just think they are. They're just really unhappy. They are looking for external validation almost all the time, taking their cues from others. Very little direction comes from their own innate wisdom, their own source connection, soul connection, God connection, whatever language you want to use, but that holistic, loving, you know, presence that just is so guiding in terms of, you know, how we make the decisions that are best for ourselves and our community. And I think they're so interesting because with that little story that you gave, you know, within that wisdom is being gained for I'm saying the quiet life is right for everyone.
No,
some people
not.
are meant to be the game changers, you know, and some people are meant to be the rule breakers, and some people are meant to be the rule followers. We all have our purpose within this beautiful tapestry of life. But there's some wisdom there that's been gained as a teenager that I just think is so brilliant, like as a marker for, say, if you want to get, you know, gold stars for being a parent, like I feel like I would give myself a gold star for that awareness if my child had that, because I can see that the other pathways, they're triggering this distress and anxiety and intensity around things like what to eat, you know, what schedule to have, what playtime you have, all these restrictions, this incredibly restrictive life that doesn't have any ability to, and no natural rhythm of inhalation, exhalation, you know, it's just all constriction and rigidity and planning, and it feels very much lacking in playfulness and humour and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of regimentation, if that's a word. Around how they live their life. And then you put all the other things. So whatever their dreams might be, if they're sort of sticking to a schedule, and then every other element of their life has a very strict schedule, then yes, they definitely lose their playfulness and their ability to just stop and ponder other possibilities, because they're just on this pathway, and that's all they can see. And then they might get partway through it and then go, it doesn't either feel right, or I'm not going to achieve it, or it's too hard, or I don't have the money, or I don't have the support, whatever it might be. And so then they're lost. You know, then they're really lost in, well, what else can I do?
Well, it's such an identity. I mean, if you create a full-time existence of what you eat, when you play, supposedly within reason, you know, when you actually do your practice time, when you do your performance time of whatever it is, like it becomes this, it's not even a full-time job. It's like this complete lifestyle. And so then when you remove the main impetus for that, it's like you're a bit rudderless, aren't you? I mean, it's almost like, say, sports people end up funneling into just one single thing, and there's like this whole other side of them. They might have this amazing skill set they can offer to the community that just gets disregarded because it's unrelated. And so we forget that we are whole in the first instance.
And then they also forget that they've loved doing it in the first place, because they can really lose their love of it. Because then it becomes all about the results or the expectations and the dream and the success that's meant to come along with all that really hard work. So a lot of people, as you do see, they do lose the passion for it. So I think I really admire anyone who, and I have seen a lot of people in sort of a professional situation where they've actually completely taken a break from it. So they might be playing one sport or doing one thing, and then suddenly they go, you know what, I'm just not happy doing it anymore. I might just take a break. And they might take a 2 or 3 year break and do something completely different. And then they might go back to what they were originally doing and be really successful at it because they actually had that opportunity to find themselves within that.
Yeah.
And find what really lights them up as well. And find some other skills.
Yeah. Well, when you bring your love back to something, you bring your whole self. Like, it's next level stuff, isn't it?
And it's easier.
Yeah. There's no toil, there's no work. You just completely love it. So this is always something that I find interesting in terms of this balance, because I do think that kids, I'm thinking of one of mine in particular who's got this, I can see the program of, if I'm not going to be perfect at it, I'm not going to start.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing that shits me to tears, as you know, Curious Quinn, because I'm a have a crack kind of gal, you know. I'll have a go at anything. I'm a kind of near enough is good enough sort of perfectionist, which is obviously an oxymoron because I'm not a perfectionist at all. I just have a go. And if it's not quite right, it needs to be fit for purpose but not perfect. I'm okay with that because life's too short. And what I see in this child of mine is this lack of willingness to even have a go. And I'm like, there's the beauty in those places. Have a crack at that, and you might just discover that what you thought you were going to be a bit, crap at, you quite like it. And you also love the discovery of learning something new, right? So it's about being okay, finding comfort in the discomfort, which we've talked about before, and finding the joy in learning something new and acquiring new information and mastering a new skill and, like all those things, right? And so I sometimes wonder if we don't push our kids in a loving way, and that's what we're talking about, say, with these, extreme athletes that have big dreams. So where is the balance there? Like, if you've got a kid who wants to be an Olympian and, is the right answer, and that's a joke, obviously, there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. It's great being a parent. Is the right move in that to support that child in their dreams to be an Olympian, or is it to pepper them with some realism of going, mate, they're the best, and there's probably even some kind of commercial interests that play into it on who actually is more marketable and actually gets a Guernsey. I mean, I'm sure that must play into it as well, the PR companies working out, who's going to look better on product placement. And so if you're pretty good but you're, a little bit on the unattractive side, so shall we say, you don't get the Guernsey, are you marketable? Is your skill there? Is there an ability to develop further? And so it doesn't often come into it, how much do you love the game? It's what your prowess is like and how much promise you have at that moment. So what is our role within that as parents?
I think we have to really look at their well-being first and foremost. Yeah. Their sense of, the fact that they are having fun, that they are enjoying themselves, and that, I don't know, I think as a kid, maybe not taking it always so seriously, everything so seriously, but I think that the intensity does also come from the parents, or from the people around them, maybe not just from the parents, but certainly the people around them, whether it be other team players, whether it be coaches, but there really is this expectation that you can't just enjoy it, that you actually have to be always improving and striving and getting better at everything. And there is something really rewarding about that, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, they have to love doing it. They have to love getting up in the morning and the motivation. So I guess just thinking about that, we have to understand what's motivating them.
Yeah. So what are the warning signs?
What's behind the motivation? Yeah. What
are the warning signs that you would look for? Now that you've obviously you've gone through this experience, because this is what I'm interested in. I've never pushed my kids to be extraordinary. I just keep saying to them, just be good humans.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, that might be considered aiming too low. I know there's lots of people that would not work for. They would sort of say, well, you know, how will your kids ever get that sense of achievement if you don't push them? But I'm just not into that, so that's my choice. But I'm curious about what are the things that you would look for with the wisdom you've acquired of when it's a healthy push versus we're moving into I'm enabling like a distressed state or an anxious state, and this is not in alignment for my kid anymore.
I think you really have to look at the balance in their days, and that there is a lot of downtime and a lot of just having fun. You know, and if every conversation is always based around the one topic being whatever their sport is, then I think, and if that's all they're thinking about, then I don't think that's healthy long term. I think it will come at a price because it's all so consuming, and then they don't know anything beyond that. So I think when you see them where they don't want to take breaks, where they won't want to have a break in a training schedule, or they won't take time out if they're feeling a little unwell, and they push themselves, I can't miss this training session, I can't miss this game, whatever it might be. I think if you're seeing them pushing that hard through illness, through exhaustion, and their personality sort of changes a little bit and they're no longer having fun, then you've really got to take a step back. And I think we have to teach these kids balance, because there's so much noise out there. There's so much temptation out there. There's so many promises for these young people out there, and with that also expectations. Some of those are good, some of those are, you know, and how do they navigate that? Adults have trouble navigating those those qualities, you know. So as the adults in these young people's lives, we have to start looking at those signs as, are they actually enjoying this, or are they feeling pressure that if they don't attend, or they don't play that game, or they don't run that race, or they don't attend that competition, that they're going to get left behind? Because ultimately that's what's going to take their well-being, their sense of well-being, and their true sense of, you know, satisfaction within just who they are. So,
and no one ever didn't become an Olympian because they missed one training session. Like, I just think that's highly unlikely, you know. And the issue we've got that we are so up against is that people love a war story. Like in our society, we celebrate war stories, and it's like you don't have credibility to share your wisdom or your own uniqueness unless you've got some big story of adversity behind it as well. Like, that's what sells, doesn't it? So we've been led up the garden path that we need to overcome this adversity in order to also be extraordinary. And so that then can cut out a lot of people, because they actually quite like a balanced life where they have a loving family and beautiful friend connections and an equal time of downtime and social and nourishment and stimulation. And so that's not interesting. It's what we're told to not find interesting. Particularly in our social media world of disposable nonsense that is on Insta and Stalkbook and all of those ones. There are more that I am too old to even know they exist. I think TikTok might be one of them. But anyway, my point is that striking that balance for our kids is feeling more and more important. I am bewildered by the lack of response from parents who are living with their anxious children and are still not compelled to, you know, do something. It doesn't even have to be big, but do something to start short-circuiting that. Like, how anxious do kids need to be? And if we don't take a moment to step back and say, how am I contributing to this anxiety, then are we being remiss as parents? I feel like we are. And I do think that, you know, as we know with this podcast, it's all about alchemising education. That is part of that education, because I think we're students of life.
Absolutely.
And kids particularly are just so spongy, like they really do absorb so much of it. And then you've got this kind of pressure pot, melting pot that happens when they're teenagers, where they're trying to work out who they are and they're trying to find identity and meaning, you know, that gives them a sense of purpose and gives them, I think, a pathway forward. And so you can see then this need to be extraordinary is such an addictive thing to anchor to. Isn't it?
It's very addictive, and I think, you know, if we didn't know what other people were doing in the world, without all the social media and without the news reports and without, you know, those big stories, we wouldn't be comparing ourselves to other people.
Yes,
we'd just be happy with what we were doing.
Yes,
you know, we wouldn't be looking for that, being that next person or striving towards that or thinking we have to overcome this in order to be this extraordinary person.
Yes.
We'd actually just be really happy with our life.
Yes.
In our local community, with our family.
Yes.
Not to say that we wouldn't still, you know, strive beyond that local community setting and find other adventures, but we would just be more content with that. But we have this real drive because we're seeing other people doing it, and then we kind of go, well, what's wrong with me?
That's right, if I don't want that.
What's wrong with me? I was talking to a young girl yesterday at school holidays here, and I was talking to a young girl yesterday and I was asking her about, I hadn't met her before, and about does she have other siblings and what school does she go to and the rest. And she goes, oh, you know, my I've got an older sister, she's 20 and she's doing medicine. She's gone to uni. I said, all right, that's lovely. I said, and, you know, what do you think you might like to do? What are you interested in? She goes, oh, nothing really. She goes, that makes me really boring, doesn't it? I said, absolutely not. I was really mortified to think that this young girl, because her sister had gone off to do medicine and that she didn't have any great desires yet, she said, I'm not sure yet. She said, I'm really not sure. I said, great. That means you've got, the world is open for any possibility.
Yes.
Whereas if these young people at a young age make these decisions that they have to follow a particular path through the education system and that's all they know, then they're limiting themselves to other possibilities that might cross their paths.
They're entraining themselves to very limited thinking. And I was reflecting on the fact that, like, I know we've been talking about, say, sports, young sports stars, but I'm really interested in those that are really focused on the academic pathway as well. And I thought, you know, those end of year scores, the ATARs or whatever they're calling them now, it's changed multiple times. Yes. But anyway, we're too old to remember what they're called now. But those scores now, when you get the highest of the high, it then is a key to getting into very select university degrees, medicine, law,
dentistry,
any of those kind of ones. But what I see within those fields is it's almost like the key for those high scores and access to those courses is actually the ability to absorb and regurgitate information so that you can continue with the indoctrination of a single form of consciousness within that. And I think medicine, Western medicine as it stands, is completely obnoxious in the way it goes about because it lacks curiosity for what other cultures have done. It lacks curiosity for what we call new science, which is actually peer-reviewed, absolutely, irrefutable science that's ignored because it's considered quirky or outside the realms. Like, I'm talking quantum science, I'm talking energy medicine, real compelling stuff that actually affects people in a positive, meaningful way where they heal from ailments, Like, this should be the stuff that just floors everybody and has people in absolute awe because it is quantitative and qualitative proof that it works. Yet we have the highest marks, those students with the highest marks going into a very controlled and another way of learning. It's almost like you narrow that field of vision, you don't widen it. And I find that so interesting. So then I'm like, is the extraordinary, the reach for the extraordinary, is it a a false economy, because in fact it's not extraordinary, it's actually narrowing you down into a very particular thing. I mean, people lose their mind if a movie star transitions to being a singer and says, oh, how can you possibly do that? It's all performance. Or if a football star suddenly becomes, you know, a basketballer. And it's like, how can you possibly do that? It's like, it's all bloody sport. Of course you can do that. If you're good at one sport, you'll probably be pretty good at another one. So why wouldn't you have that agility?
Yep.
But it's like when we get caught up in the extraordinary, we are amazed as a society when anyone steps outside their lane. Like, that's creating all kind of disorder. It's like, actually, the curious mind, as you know, Quinn, is so much more powerful than the streamlined, I'm an expert in this field and therefore cannot open myself to anything else than what I know to be true, or what I've read in a textbook.
Or what I've been taught and told to use in that specific way.
So is this a mirage, this idea of being extraordinary, this addiction to being extraordinary? Is it a mirage as a way to get people through the funnel and, you know, it becomes the gatekeeper?
Well, I guess absolutely. I mean, you've got to also look at what's behind the systems that are being built.
Yes, and who funds them?
And who funds them.
Oh, you're getting into conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat wearing.
Okay.
Take care.
Sorry,
there.
I thought that was factual. I thought that was a known fact. Okay.
I agree. I think it's very interesting. Where does the money come from?
And you kind of go, you know, as with a lot of science reports, yeah, we are getting into that territory, aren't we? You know, who you have to put up there what your aim is for that report anyway. So anyway, yes.
Well, it's all commercial interests. I mean, I think that's what it is. And and then you suddenly we see with, say, Army cadets, it's very obvious. They wear a uniform, they're going into an area that is generally controlled and guarded and with, you know, big ass fences and barbed wire. It's quite overt what it is. You're coming in to be indoctrinated into this kind of thinking, and we'll call it training, but it's an indoctrination into a certain ideology. I think what we are romanced by is the idea of getting a high score anywhere, but it's a high score based on what? Someone's algorithm, someone's assessment, and I think that there is a wisdom that hits us in our, like 40s and 50s, where we suddenly think, we turn our attention to our wisdom within and we say, well, how do I feel about that? What's my truth? And I fully believe, and I believe this is also factually based, scientifically backed, is that the truth has resonance at a cellular level within the body. Like, you feel it with your body, don't you?
Totally.
You actually, when you hear the truth, you don't need to say, give me the corroborating evidence or give me the peer-reviewed thing, right? That's like some kind of programming that kicks in that makes you doubt it. But when you hear the truth, you feel it in your body. So your body is like this amazing barometer for truth when you tune into that. And I think our kids have that far more than we do. It's like we've kind of dulled that sense. But the kids are being
convinced otherwise.
They are. They're being talked out of it. They really are. And I think they know. So, in fact, what I suspect, this is why I was curious about your experience, because in my household we celebrate unique mediocrity is what we'll call it. But, you know, I'm like, you're here to do whatever you're here to do, and I celebrate that. Be a good human, don't hurt people, don't hurt yourselves.
Yes.
They're kind of the house rules. But otherwise, everything else is available to them. And so they have that sort of, I guess, gentle exploratory enabling within our household. But I do wonder sometimes about where is the healthy push? Where is the healthy release and where is the healthy push? And I think that that's been your lived experience where you've pulled back from that. And I see, looking at your family, how restitution happens quite fast for the kids when you take the pressure off and you say, I just want you to be happy.
Yeah, totally.
Your choice, want you to be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that they have that own, they answer to themselves.
Yes.
They don't answer to anybody else.
Yeah.
No one else is the measurement of what makes them happy. They are the measurement of that. They have it already inside them.
So if we come back round to that, and, you know, if parents need a framework for this kind of stuff, if they have a sneaking suspicion they have an anxious kid, which will probably be quite obvious to them, they've just been in denial about it or thinking they're impotent to do anything about it. If we take that adage of the truth has resonance at a cellular level in our own body, so we can recognise that, we could simply ask ourselves, is my child happy? And if the answer is no, then you look to the child and you start that conversation, and you can create some encouragement around balance and a healthy discipline of rhythm, you know, an ability to let go, an ability to be agile with plans and connection and all those sort of things.
And letting go of the social expectations. So, for example, if your child has come home from school and they're exhausted, or they've come home from their day activity and they're exhausted and they don't want to go to training that night, they go, I just need to relax. Now, I've fought this one a lot of times because we have this expectation, well, you're part of a team. You got to show up, you know, and I think we've just got to go, sure. Yeah. Because the motivation to be part of that activity has to come from within them.
Absolutely.
And if it's important to them, they'll be able to decide. But they need to be able to say, you know what, I'm really tired.
Yes.
And I just need to stay at home tonight.
Yes.
I need a night off. We need to give them permission to make those decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
Because then they're learning their own flow. They're learning their own balance. Whereas if we say, oh, no, the coach is expecting you and you won't get to play a game this weekend if you miss training on, you know, the night before the game or whatever it might be, then, you know, we're not helping those kids learn those balances in
well, it's such a should. I mean, you know, if they're going just because they should, then we know what we do with the shoulds, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So I think that, what you're saying is so accurate. And I do, you know, counsel parents to say, initially your child might not trust even their ability to make that call. And so I'm a big fan of pulling the parenting card, as you know. So on those occasions, I trust my wisdom to say, you know what, I can see you're tired, so tonight we're not going to, you know. And sometimes I'll create a more palatable excuse of saying, okay, we've got a family commitment on, or whatever it might be. But it might be slightly manipulative, but I think parenting is manipulation a lot of the time, because you're trying to deal with free will versus community will, shaping the individual, and oh my God, all the things that go with parenting. That, you know, the pay is terrible, isn't it? It's terrible and wonderful all at once. A beautiful conversation, Quinn. I just love it. Yes, the addiction of being extraordinary. Is it worth it?
Yeah, I just feel like, you know, with the wisdom of my life now, I just feel like the more life is led simply with the right people surrounding you, doing things that make you laugh, bring you joy, you know, that's all that matters.
Getting outside, connecting with nature.
Getting outside, connecting with nature. Yeah, getting rest, eating good food. You know, life doesn't have to be complicated.
That's right. And I think if you have a particular skill or, you know, genius, then the ripple effect of how that's needed within the community will create the extraordinary anyway. It will reach the people it needs to reach. And that in itself is extraordinary.
Absolutely. We know that we don't have to be changing everybody in the world, and we don't have to be the, you know, the massive superstar of whatever area you want to be. Those people who hit us closest to home in terms of their extraordinary are the ones who are literally on our doorstep.
Yes.
The ones who are living, you know, the life that they love living.
That's right.
Without any expectation from others and without any other person judging them.
Yes, and you just don't know how your ripple effect is going to affect, you know, your community, whether it's wider or it's, you know, the closer community. But there's beauty and perfection in all of it.
Absolutely.
Another delightful conversation, Quinn.
Thank you. Let's get back to being ordinary today.
Oh,
don't
let's
you
be
think?
so ordinary. Let's be extraordinary. See you next time, Quanta folks.